The stars looked different from the bridge of the Aurora's dawn. Captain Jake Mitchell stood at the viewing window, watching the blue-green planet of Zephyria Prime grow larger as they approached. Behind him, his small crew made final preparations for what could be the most important diplomatic mission in human history. "Landing clearance confirmed, Captain," called out pilot Tony Rodriguez from his station. "They're directing us to the main spaceport outside their capital city." Jake nodded, his hands clasped behind his back. 3 months of travel had led to this moment. The Zephyrian Empire controlled the richest mining systems in this sector of space, and Earth desperately needed those resources. But the Zephyrians were known for their pride and their contempt for younger species. Dr. Lisa Carter approached, carrying a data pad filled with cultural notes. "Remember, Jake, they value strength above all else. Any sign of weakness and these negotiations will fail before they begin." "I know," Jake replied, "but we can't pretend to be something we're not. Honesty has gotten humanity this far." Security Officer Amy Brooks joined them at the window. Her hand rested casually on her sidearm, though Jake hoped weapons wouldn't be necessary. "Their ships are impressive," she noted, watching the sleek Zephyrian vessels patrol around their planet. The Aurora's dawn touched down with a gentle thrum. Through the viewport, Jake could see the Zephyrian welcoming committee. They were tall, easily 7 feet, with blue-tinted skin and elegant features that spoke of both beauty and danger. Their ceremonial armor gleamed in the afternoon sun. "Remember," Jake told his team as they prepared to disembark, "we're here as equals, not as beggars. Earth has plenty to offer in return for mining rights." The airlock hissed open, and Jake stepped onto alien soil for the first time. The gravity was slightly heavier than Earth's, and the air carried the scent of crystalline flowers that grew throughout the city. The Zephyrian delegation waited in perfect formation. Their leader stepped forward. She was younger than Jake had expected, perhaps in her 30s by human standards, though alien aging was hard to judge. Her silver hair was braided with what looked like small gems, and her eyes held an intelligence that was both sharp and cold. "I am Princess Kira Thess, heir to the Zephyrian throne," she announced in perfect English, though her accent gave the words a musical quality. "You are the human delegation?" "Captain Jake Mitchell, representing the United Earth government," Jake replied with a respectful bow. "This is Dr. Lisa Carter, our cultural specialist, Tony Rodriguez, our pilot, and Amy Brooks, our security officer." The princess's eyes lingered on Amy's weapon with what might have been amusement. "Security? Do you fear us so much?" "We respect your strength," Jake answered carefully, "but we also believe in being prepared." Princess Kira Thess smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "How practical. Come then. My father awaits, though I wonder if you truly understand what you're asking for." The journey through the Crystal City was breathtaking. Buildings rose like grown gems from the ground, their surfaces reflecting light in ways that created rainbow patterns on the streets. Zephyrian citizens stopped to stare at the humans, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed disdain. "Your people seem unimpressed," Lisa observed quietly. "They have never seen humans before," the princess replied without turning around. "Stories of your kind have reached us, of course, a young species that conquered their world through cleverness rather than strength. Many find such tales amusing." Jake felt his jaw tighten but said nothing. The princess was clearly testing them already. The royal palace was carved from a single massive crystal that seemed to pulse with inner light. Guards in elaborate armor flanked every entrance, their weapons, both beautiful and deadly. Jake noticed that each guard was easily a foot taller than any human, and moved with the fluid grace of natural warriors. They were led through corridors lined with portraits of previous rulers, each more intimidating than the last. Finally, they arrived at a massive chamber called the Hall of Ancestors. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The hall was enormous, its ceiling lost in shadows above. But what drew his attention were the displays of ancient armor that lined the walls. Dozens of suits stood in perfect formation, each one a masterpiece of both art and engineering. Some were elegant and flowing, others brutal and intimidating. All of them spoke of a warrior culture that had perfected the art of combat over thousands of years. Impressive, isn't it? Princess Kirithess said, noticing his fascination. Each suit belonged to one of our greatest warriors. Some conquered entire star systems, others held off invasions that would have destroyed lesser species. At the center of the hall stood the most magnificent armor of all. It was larger than the others, built for someone who must have been 8 feet tall. Its surface was a deep, black metal that seemed to absorb light, decorated with intricate patterns that hurt to look at directly. Even inactive, it radiated power. "That is the war suit of Veltar the Unconquered," the princess said with obvious pride. "Our greatest warrior, who never lost a battle in 200 years of conquest. The armor was blessed by the gods themselves and grants its wearer strength beyond imagining." "It's remarkable," Jake said honestly. "The craftsmanship is beyond anything I've ever seen." The princess's expression shifted to one of condescension. "Of course you're impressed. Your people could never create something so magnificent. You rely on crude tools and simple machines because you lack the natural strength and warrior spirit of true fighters." Amy stepped forward, her face flushed with anger, but Jake held up a hand to stop her. "We may do things differently," he said calmly, "but humanity has survived and thrived through cooperation and ingenuity." "Survived?" the princess repeated with a laugh. "Yes, I suppose running and hiding is a form of survival. But could any of your kind even wear such armor? Could they lift it, let alone fight in it?" Before Jake could answer, a deep voice echoed through the hall. "Enough, daughter." Emperor Velthak approached from a side entrance, flanked by advisors. He was even more imposing than his daughter, his presence filling the room like a physical force. His eyes, the same ice blue as the princess's, fixed on Jake with calculating interest. "Welcome, humans," he said. "Let us see if your reputation for cleverness extends to the art of negotiation." As they moved deeper into the palace for the formal talks, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was being evaluated not just as a diplomat, but as a potential threat. The princess walked beside her father, occasionally glancing back at the human delegation with an expression Jake couldn't quite read. The real test, he realized, was just beginning. The negotiation chamber was smaller than the Hall of Ancestors, but no less impressive. A circular table made from what appeared to be a single piece of blue crystal dominated the room. Emperor Velthak took his place at the head, with Princess Kirithess at his right hand. Jake and his team sat across from them, the weight of centuries of Zephyrian dominance pressing down on the room. "Let us begin," the Emperor said, his voice carrying the authority of absolute power. "You seek mining rights in the Kepler system. State your terms." Jake had prepared for this moment during the 3-month journey. "Earth offers a fair partnership. We'll provide advanced terraforming technology, medical research, and manufacturing expertise in exchange for mining access to 3 asteroid belts in the outer system." Princess Kirithess leaned forward, her eyes glittering with what looked like amusement. "Partnership? You speak as if you're our equals." "We believe all species have value," Lisa interjected diplomatically. "Humanity may be young, but we've developed technologies that could benefit both our peoples." The princess laughed, a sound like crystal bells that somehow managed to be insulting. "Technologies? You mean the crude devices you use because your bodies are too weak for real strength?" Jake felt his temper rising but kept his voice level. "Our technologies have allowed us to travel between stars, to communicate across vast distances, to cure diseases that once killed millions. I'd hardly call that crude. Compared to what true warriors accomplish with their own hands, yes, crude indeed." The princess stood and began pacing around the table. "Tell me, Captain Mitchell, could you lift a 200-pound sword? Could you fight for hours in heavy armor? Could you crush stone with your bare hands?" "No," Jake admitted. "But we've never needed to. Humans succeed through intelligence and cooperation, not brute force." Emperor Velthak watched the exchange with interest but said nothing. His advisors whispered among themselves, occasionally glancing at the humans with expressions ranging from curiosity to disdain. "Intelligence," Princess Kirithess repeated mockingly. "Yet you need machines to do what any Zephyrian child could accomplish. You wear soft clothing because your skin can't handle real armor. You use projectile weapons because you lack the strength for proper blades. How can such weakness be called intelligence? Amy's hand moved toward her sidearm, but Tony caught her wrist and shook his head slightly. The tension in the room was building, and Jake knew he had to diffuse it somehow. We have different strengths, he said carefully. That's what makes cooperation valuable. We complement each other's abilities. Complement? The princess's voice grew sharper. We are the Zephyrian Empire. We have conquered 17 star systems. We have never been defeated in battle. What could we possibly need from a species that requires tools to survive? Jake stood, matching her intensity. Respect, for one thing. The same respect we're offering you. The room fell silent. Several of the Zephyrian advisors looked shocked that a human had dared to speak so boldly to their princess. Emperor Velthak's expression remained unreadable. Princess Kirithus stepped closer to Jake, her height advantage making him crane his neck to meet her eyes. Respect must be earned, human. Your people have done nothing worthy of it. We've survived, Jake said quietly. We've grown, we've learned. We've come here seeking friendship, not conquest. Survival is the minimum requirement for existence, she replied coldly. It proves nothing. The negotiations continued for hours, but it became clear that Princess Kirithus was determined to make the process as difficult as possible. Every human proposal was met with dismissal. Every attempt at compromise was turned into another opportunity for insult. During a break, Jake's team gathered in the corridor outside the chamber. This is impossible, Lisa whispered. She's not negotiating in good faith. She's just here to humiliate us. Why would they bring us all this way just to mock us? Tony asked. Amy's jaw was tight with controlled anger. Because they can. They want to make sure we know our place before they give us their scraps. Jake stared out a window at the crystal city below. Somewhere out there, ordinary Zephyrians were living their lives, probably unaware that the future of human expansion might be decided in this room. We can't give up, he said finally. Too much depends on this. When they returned to the chamber, Princess Kirithus seemed even more determined to prove human inferiority. She began telling stories of great Zephyrian warriors, each tale designed to highlight human weakness by comparison. Veltar the Unconquered once held off an entire invasion fleet single-handedly, she said, her eyes fixed on Jake. His armor amplified his natural strength to such a degree that he could tear apart enemy ships with his bare hands. Could any human accomplish such a feat? We'd find another way, Jake replied. We always do. Another way, she repeated with scorn. Always hiding behind your tools and tricks. Never facing challenges with honest strength. Something in her tone finally broke through Jake's diplomatic restraint. Honest strength? Is that what you call wearing magical armor? Sounds like using tools to me. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Even Emperor Velthak raised an eyebrow at Jake's boldness. Princess Kirithus's face flushed with anger. That armor responds only to true warriors. It has been inactive for 3,000 years because none have been worthy to wear it since Veltar's death. If it's been inactive for 3,000 years, Jake shot back, how do you know it even works anymore? Maybe it's just an expensive museum piece. The princess slammed her hand on the crystal table, the sound echoing through the chamber like a gunshot. How dare you insult our greatest treasure? I'm not insulting anything, Jake said, standing his ground. I'm just pointing out that claiming something is magical doesn't make it so. For a moment, Jake thought the princess might actually attack him. Her advisors looked ready to intervene, and Amy's hand had moved back to her weapon. Then Princess Kirithus smiled, but it was the cold, predatory smile of a hunter who had just cornered her prey. Very well, human, she said softly. Let us test your skepticism. I challenge you to activate Veltar's armor. If you can make even a single system respond, I will negotiate these mining rights in good faith. Jake felt his heart sink. And if I can't? Then you accept our terms without question. You take whatever mining access we choose to grant under whatever conditions we set. The Emperor leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued. An interesting proposition, daughter. It's not a fair test, Lisa protested. The armor was designed for Zephyrians, not humans. Exactly, the princess replied triumphantly, which proves my point about human inadequacy. Jake looked around the room at the expectant faces. His team was trying to signal him not to accept, but he could see that this was their only chance. If he backed down now, they'd return to Earth empty-handed. Fine, he said. I accept your challenge. Princess Kirithes's smile widened. Excellent. We'll return to the Hall of Ancestors immediately. This should be quite entertaining. As they filed out of the negotiation chamber, Jake caught Tony's worried expression. Boss, Tony whispered. Are you sure about this? Jake wasn't sure about anything anymore, but he knew that sometimes the biggest risks led to the greatest rewards. And something deep in his gut told him that this challenge was about more than just diplomatic posturing. The walk back to the Hall of Ancestors felt like a death march. The Hall of Ancestors felt different this time. Word of the challenge had spread quickly through the palace, and dozens of Zephyrian nobles had gathered to witness what they expected would be a humiliating human failure. Their voices created a low buzz of anticipation that echoed off the crystal walls. Jake stood before Veltar's armor, acutely aware of every eye in the room watching his every move. The massive suit seemed even more intimidating up close. The black metal surface was covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and move in his peripheral vision. Whatever technology had created this masterpiece was far beyond current human understanding. Princess Kirithes positioned herself where everyone could see her, clearly relishing the moment. Behold, she announced to the gathered crowd, the human who thinks our greatest treasure is merely a museum piece. Laughter rippled through the Zephyrian audience. Jake tried to ignore the sound and focus on the armor itself. Up close, he could see that the patterns weren't just decorative. They looked almost like circuit boards, though far more complex than anything humans had ever designed. Having second thoughts, the princess asked sweetly. Jake rolled up his sleeves and approached the armor. Not at all. Dr. Carter stepped closer, her scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic caution. Jake, look at these markings. They're not random decorations. There's a system here, some kind of interface design. An interface that responds only to worthy warriors, Princess Kirithes said coldly. Not to soft humans who need machines, to survive. Jake placed his hands on the armor's chest plate, half expecting to feel nothing but cold metal. The surface was surprisingly warm, as if some internal power source was still active after all these centuries. He closed his eyes and tried to feel for any kind of response. Nothing happened. The Zephyrian laughter grew louder. Someone called out something in their language that made others chuckle. Jake didn't need a translation to know it wasn't complimentary. Try the helmet, Lisa suggested quietly. If it's a neural interface, that's where the primary connection would be. Jake moved to the armor's head and placed both palms on the sides of the helmet. The metal felt warm here too, almost alive. He pressed harder, trying to make contact with whatever sensors might be hidden beneath the surface. Still nothing. Princess Kirithes's voice carried clearly over the crowd. Perhaps we should end this farce. The human has clearly, she never finished her sentence. Without warning, a thin line of blue light appeared along one of the pattern lines on the chest plate, then another. Within seconds, the entire armor began to glow with soft bioluminescent circuits that traced intricate pathways across its surface. The laughter died instantly. Jake stumbled backward as the helmet's visor suddenly blazed to life. With an otherworldly light that cast eerie shadows around the hall, the armor's systems hummed with power, producing sounds that ranged from barely audible whispers to deep, resonant tones that seemed to come from the armor's core. That's impossible, someone whispered in heavily accented English. The armor continued. To activate. Holographic displays flickered to life around the helmet, showing symbols and text in what looked like ancient Zephyrian script. The chest plate opened with a soft hiss, revealing an interior lined with thousands of fiber optic threads that pulsed with their own inner light. Princess Kirithes stared in shock, her face pale. This cannot be happening. Emperor Velthak stepped forward, his expression unreadable. The armor recognizes him. Jake felt drawn to the armor as if something was calling to him. Almost without conscious thought, he reached out and touched the open chest plate. The moment his fingers made contact, the entire suit exploded with light. Data streams flowed across his vision, though he couldn't understand the symbols. The armor's internal systems ran diagnostic checks that appeared as cascading displays of information. Weapon systems came online with soft chimes and mechanical whirs. Environmental controls activated, creating a gentle breeze that carried the scent of ozone and something else. Something that reminded Jake of Earth's forests after a thunderstorm. The armor began to change, its internal structure shifting and adapting. The chest cavity widened, the limbs adjusted their proportions, and the helmet reconfigured itself. It was adapting to human physiology in real time. By the ancient gods, breathed one of the Zephyrian advisors. Jake found himself stepping into the armor almost without conscious decision. The suit closed around him with a series of mechanical clicks and hisses. He expected to feel crushed by the weight, but instead, he felt lighter than air. The armor's power systems integrated with his nervous system so smoothly that within moments it felt like an extension of his own body. Information flowed through his mind: battle tactics, weapon specifications, historical records. But it wasn't overwhelming. The armor's artificial intelligence filtered and organized the data, presenting only what was relevant to the current situation. Through the helmet's display, Jake could see the shocked faces of the Zephyrian crowd. Princess Kirathes looked as if she had seen a ghost. Her father's expression had shifted from casual interest to something approaching awe. Jake took a step forward, and the armor responded perfectly to his movement. Another step, then another. The weapon systems showed green across the board. Oh, power core hummed with enough energy to level a city block. And somehow, impossibly, it all felt natural. The legends spoke true. Emperor Velthak said in a voice barely above a whisper, "The Chosen One has returned." What legends? Jake asked, his voice amplified and modified by the armor's systems until it carried an otherworldly authority. Princess. Kirathes seemed to shake herself out of her shock. Ancient stories, myths. They speak of sky dwellers who would return to awaken the sleeping guardians. Sky dwellers. Lisa stepped forward, her scientific mind racing. You mean there are references to humans in your ancient texts? Not humans, the Emperor said slowly. The starborn, the ones who came from the void between worlds to aid our ancestors in the Great War against the Devourers. Jake felt the armor's databases responding to the Emperor's words. Historical files began opening in his peripheral vision, showing images of battles fought long ago. And in those battles, he saw figures that looked unmistakably human fighting, alongside ancient Zephyrians. This is impossible, Princess Kirathes said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. Humans are a young species. You've barely achieved interstellar travel. Maybe we're older than anyone realized, Jake replied, still getting used to the armor's voice modulation. Maybe we just forgot. The armor's systems continued to come online. Jake could feel weapon systems that hadn't been active for millennia powering up. Shield generators that could deflect planetary bombardment tested their functionality. And, deep in the armor's core, something far more significant was awakening. A connection to a network of similar suits, scattered across the galaxy, all waiting for the return of their intended users. There are more of these, aren't there? Jake asked, somehow knowing the answer. Emperor Velthak nodded slowly. 12 suits in total. The greatest warriors of our golden age wore them into battle against an enemy that threatened to devour all life in this sector of space. And they won. They won, the Emperor confirmed. But the cost was terrible. The starborn disappeared, and the armors went silent. We thought they had died, and the suits with them. Jake looked around the hall at the dozens of Zephyrian faces staring at him in wonder and fear. Princess Kirathes stood frozen, her worldview crumbling around her. Well, Jake said, his armored voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall, I guess we need to talk about those mining rights again. For the first time since they'd arrived, Princess Kirathes had nothing to say. The armor systems continued to integrate with Jake's consciousness, downloading thousands of years of stored memories and battle data. As the information flowed through his mind, he began to understand the true scope of what was happening. This wasn't just about activating an ancient weapon. It was about uncovering a lost chapter of galactic history. "The armor is showing me things," Jake said, his voice echoing strangely in the vast hall. "Memories from the war you mentioned." Princess Kirithess had finally found her voice, though it shook with uncertainty. "What kind of memories?" Images flooded Jake's vision through the helmet's display. He saw battles fought in the void between stars, massive ships locked in combat while armored warriors fought hand-to-hand in the vacuum of space. But what struck him most was how familiar the human figures looked. They could have been his own ancestors. "I see humans and Zephyrians fighting together," Jake said. "Not as separate species, but as true allies. Your ancestors called us the Starborn, but we called you the Crystal Guard." Emperor Velthak stepped closer, his expression intense with curiosity. "You can access the memory banks? That should be impossible. The neural interface was designed specifically for human brain patterns," Jake finished. "That's why no Zephyrian has been able to activate these suits since the war ended."
"They were never meant for your people to wear." The silence that followed was profound. Jake could feel the shock rippling through the assembled nobles. Everything they believed about their greatest heroes was being turned upside down. Dr. Carter
pushed through the crowd, her scientific excitement overriding diplomatic protocol. "Jake, can you access technical specifications? Design schematics?" Jake focused on the armor's database, and immediately holographic displays materialized around him. Three-dimensional blueprints showing the suit's construction, power systems, and weapon configurations rotated in the air above his outstretched hand. "My God," Lisa breathed. "This is hybrid technology. Look at the power core design. It's definitely not purely Zephyrian engineering." The holographic display shifted to show the core's construction. Even Jake, with his limited technical knowledge, could see that it combined two distinctly different technological approaches. One was elegant and flowing, clearly Zephyrian in origin. The other was more compact and efficient, built with the kind of practical engineering that humans favored. The humans and Zephyrians didn't just fight together, Jake realized aloud. They shared technology. They built these suits as a joint project. Princess Kirithess finally managed to speak. "But that would mean our greatest legends, our most sacred stories, are based on cooperation, not conquest," Jake finished gently. "Your ancestors achieved their greatest victory through partnership with another species." The armor's memory banks opened another file, and suddenly Jake was seeing the war from the perspective of one of the original wearers. The enemy, the devourers, were unlike anything in current galactic civilization. They consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing but empty space behind. Neither humans nor Zephyrians could have stopped them alone. "The devourers," Jake said, sharing what he was seeing. "They weren't just another conquering species. They literally ate planets, converting matter into energy to fuel their expansion." Emperor Velthak nodded grimly. "The ancient texts speak of them. The enemy that came from dark space, consuming everything in their path." 12 armored warriors stopped them? Tony asked skeptically. Jake accessed more memory files, and the scope of the ancient war became clear. Not just 12 warriors. 12 leaders, each commanding fleets and armies. The suits weren't just weapons, they were command centers, linking their wearers to vast networks of ships and soldiers. The holographic display around Jake shifted again, showing the final battle of the war. He watched in awe as human and Zephyrian fleets moved in perfect coordination, their combined tactics proving superior to the Devourers' overwhelming numbers. "We won by combining human adaptability with Zephyrian strength," Jake said. "Neither species could have triumphed alone." Princess Kirithess was staring at the holographic displays with a mixture of wonder and distress. "But if this is true, why did the humans disappear? Why did we forget about the Alliance?" Jake searched the armor's memories for an answer and found files that made his heart sink. The cost of victory was too high. Both species were devastated. The humans who survived the war chose to retreat to the Outer Rim to rebuild and recover. They left these suits as guardians, in case the Devourers ever returned. And we forgot, the Emperor said quietly. Over the centuries, we transformed cooperation into conquest, partnership into domination. Not forgot, Jake corrected, accessing deeper memory files. The truth was deliberately hidden. There was a faction among your ancestors who believed Zephyrian independence was more important than historical accuracy. They rewrote the records, turning human allies into Zephyrian gods. The armor showed him images of ancient Zephyrian historians altering databases, changing partnership into divine blessing, cooperation into superiority. It was a slow process that took centuries, but eventually, the truth was buried beneath layers of modified myth. Amy stepped forward, her expression troubled. So the Zephyrian Empire's entire identity is built on a lie? Not a lie, Jake said carefully. A misunderstanding that became legend. Your ancestors were genuinely heroic. They just weren't alone in their heroism. Princess Kirithus looked as if her entire world had crumbled. How can I rule a people whose greatest pride is based on deception? You rule them by learning from the truth, Jake replied. By understanding that real strength comes from unity, not isolation. The armor's systems chimed softly, and new information appeared in Jake's display. There's more. The other suits, they're still out there waiting, and the network they're connected to is picking up signals. What kind of signals? Emperor Velthak asked. Jake felt his blood run cold as the armor translated the data. Long-range sensors are detecting movement in the dark spaces beyond our galaxy, the same energy signatures as the Devourers. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. Several nobles backed away from Jake as if the armor itself might bring catastrophe upon them. Are you saying they're returning? Princess Kirithus asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm saying the sensors think something is out there, Jake replied. Something that matches the profiles in the armor's database. He accessed more files looking for information about the other suits. The armor showed him locations scattered across known space, some in Zephyrian territory, others in sectors, controlled by species he'd never heard of. We need to find the other suits, Jake said. If the Devourers are really coming back, we'll need every advantage we can get. And we'll need to rebuild the alliance, Lisa added, her mind already working on the implications. Humans and Zephyrians working together like our ancestors did. Princess Kirithus looked around at her people's shocked faces. The nobles who had gathered to watch a human fail were now confronting the possibility that their entire civilization might need to depend on that same human for survival. I don't know if my people are ready for such a change, she said honestly. Jake began powering down the armor's weapon systems, though he kept the main functions active. They don't have to change overnight, but they need to know the truth. And if they reject it, if they refuse to believe that cooperation, not domination, made us great, Jake met her eyes through the armor's visor. Then when the Devourers come, we'll face them the way our ancestors did. Together, whether your people are ready or not. The weight of galactic history pressed down on the hall as everyone contemplated what they had learned. The age of Zephyrian isolation was ending whether they wanted it to or not. The news of a human activating Veltar's armor spread through the Zephyrian Empire like wildfire. Within hours, communication channels across their 17 star systems buzzed with reports, rumors, and wild speculation. Some called it a miracle, others a trick, and still others saw it as a sign of impending doom. Jake remained in the armor as emergency sessions convened throughout the palace. The suit had become more than just a weapon or piece of technology. It was proof of a shared history that challenged everything the Zephyrian Empire believed about itself. In the Royal Council chamber, Emperor Velthak faced the most difficult decision of his reign. His advisors were divided, some demanding that the humans be expelled before they could spread their lies, others arguing that the armor's activation could not be ignored. The religious implications alone could destabilize the empire, warned High Advisor Kelvash. For 3,000 years, our people have believed that Veltar was chosen by the gods themselves, Now we're supposed to accept that he was partnered with aliens? The evidence is undeniable, countered Science Minister Thaylin. The armor's activation, the holographic records, the technical specifications, they all support the humans' claims. Princess Kira thus sat quietly through most of the debate, her earlier arrogance replaced by deep contemplation. Finally, she spoke. The question isn't whether the evidence is real. The question is what we do about it. Jake, still wearing the partially powered armor, stepped forward. The weapon systems were offline, but the suit's communication and defensive capabilities remained active. Your Highness, I understand this is difficult, but consider what the truth actually means. Tell me, she said simply. It means your ancestors were even greater than your legends claimed, Jake replied. They didn't just conquer through superior strength. They united two species and saved the galaxy. That's not a source of shame, it's the greatest achievement in galactic history. Dr. Carter had been analyzing the armor's technical readouts with Zephyrian scientists throughout the night. She approached the council with her findings. The hybrid technology in these suits is centuries ahead of anything either species has developed since. If we could understand and reproduce it, we could revolutionize both civilizations, Science Minister Thaylin finished excitedly. Energy systems, faster than light communication, defensive capabilities we can barely imagine. Emperor Velthak studied the holographic displays that still flickered around Jake. And you believe other suits like this exist? The armor's network shows 11 other locations, Jake confirmed. Most are in unexplored space, but 2 are in sectors controlled by species we know, the Andromedans and the Centauri Federation. Species that have no love for the Zephyrian Empire, High Advisor Kelvash pointed out darkly. Because you've spent centuries conquering instead of cooperating, Amy said bluntly, earning shocked looks from the Zephyrian nobles. Princess Kira surprised everyone by nodding in agreement. She's right. We've built our empire on the belief that strength meant domination. Perhaps it's time to learn what our ancestors really understood about strength. The debate continued for hours, but Jake could see the tide slowly turning. The younger Zephyrians, especially those in scientific fields, were fascinated by the implications of hybrid technology. The military commanders were concerned about the potential return of the Devourers. Even the religious leaders were beginning to reinterpret their ancient texts in light of the new evidence. Finally, Emperor Velthak called for silence. We face a choice that will define the next era of our civilization. Do we cling to comfortable lies or do we embrace a difficult truth? He stood and approached Jake, studying the ancient armor with new respect. Captain Mitchell, if what you've shown us is accurate, then humanity and the Zephyrian Empire share a bond that transcends our recent history. We do, Jake replied. And if the Devourers are really returning, we'll need that bond to survive. Then let us forge it anew, the Emperor declared. Princess Kira, you will lead a joint expedition to locate the other armors. Captain Mitchell will serve as your partner and guide. Princess Kira looked stunned. Father, You mocked our guests when they arrived, the Emperor said firmly but not unkindly. Now you have the chance to make amends by helping to restore the greatest alliance in galactic history. Jake felt the armor's systems respond to the Emperor's words, as if the ancient technology approved of the decision. Your Majesty, we'll need more than just an expedition. We'll need to prepare both our peoples for what's coming. What do you propose? Jake accessed the armor's strategic databases, calling up battle plans and defensive formations from the ancient war. Joint training exercises, shared technology development, cultural exchange programs to help our people understand each other again. And most importantly, Lisa added, we need to find ways to activate the other armors. If they require human operators, we'll need volunteers who are compatible with the neural interfaces. Princess Kira stepped forward, her earlier hostility completely gone. Captain Mitchell, I owe you an apology. I judged your entire species based on my own ignorance and pride. We all have things to learn, Jake replied diplomatically. The important thing is that we learn them together. Over the following days, the palace became a hub of frantic activity. Zephyrian scientists worked alongside Jake's team to understand the armor's technology. Military planners developed new tactical doctrines that combined human flexibility with Zephyrian strength. Diplomats began crafting messages to other galactic civilizations, explaining the discovery and its implications. The armor remained bonded to Jake, its systems now fully integrated with his nervous system. He found he could activate its functions with a thought, access its vast databases instinctively, and even communicate with the distant sensor networks that watched the galaxy's borders. 3 weeks after first donning the suit, Jake stood once, again in the Hall of Ancestors, but now it had been transformed into a command center, with holographic displays showing the locations of all 12 armors and the status of long-range sensor arrays. Princess Kirithess approached, wearing a specially modified version of traditional Zephyrian armor that incorporated some of the hybrid technology principles. "The expedition fleet is ready," she reported. 6 ships, 3 human, 3 Zephyrian. We'll start with the armor in Andromedan space. "Any word from Earth about additional volunteers?" Jake asked. 100 applications so far, Tony replied, with a grin. Apparently, the idea of wearing ancient alien armor appeals to a lot of people. Jake smiled, though the expression was hidden behind his helmet's visor. Let's hope some of them are compatible. As they prepared to depart, Jake took one last look around the Hall of Ancestors. The other suits of armor looked somehow less impressive now that he understood they were purely Zephyrian designs. The real treasures were the 12 hybrid suits, scattered across the galaxy, waiting for their intended users to return. "Captain," Princess Kirithess said formally, "I hereby officially grant humanity full mining rights to the Kepler system, along with mutual defense agreements and technology-sharing protocols. And I accept on behalf of the United Earth Government," Jake replied, equally formally. "But more than that, I accept the restoration of an alliance that should never have been broken." Emperor Velthak watched from the chamber's entrance as the expedition members made their final preparations. "The future begins now," he said quietly. Jake activated the armor's communication systems, sending a message that would reach every corner of known space. "To all species, to all civilizations that value freedom over consumption, cooperation over conquest, the Guardians are awakening. The Alliance is reborn, and this time, we'll be ready." As the expedition ships lifted off, from Zephyria Prime, Jake felt the armor's sensors detect subtle changes in the deep space monitoring networks. Something vast was indeed moving in the dark between galaxies, still years away but definitely approaching. But for the first time in 3,000 years, the galaxy would not face that threat alone. Human ingenuity and Zephyrian strength, working together as they were always meant to, would stand against whatever emerged from the cosmic void. The age of cooperation had begun again,